Good morning to everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation. For those who don't know me, actually, I'm just a researcher of the Italian National Research Council, and I'm part of an institute that works on the study of judicial systems. And I'm a kind of veteran of, say, the first towards cyber justice and now the ACT project. Please interrupt me if you cannot listen to me if there are other technical problems, because I will continue just by myself. And so the main objective of this presentation, as far as I imagined it, it is to discuss about the results of, let's say, this part of the working group that worked on the analysis, on the inventorying and analysis of framework documents that try to discipline the use of artificial intelligence in very different contexts, and hopefully, let's say, in the context, in the judicial context. So today I will present the work that I conducted together with a research assistant, and I will try to show you some results in order to discuss them, to gather some suggestions, criticism, and improve the work, because we have data now. I try to crunch some data, but then other analysis can be done, and also we may further also the gathering of data activity. And also I'd like to incentivize this debate on the normativity of the use of artificial intelligence in our context of study. So as most of you know, the discussion and the use of artificial intelligence is more and more diffusing, also in the judiciary, even though in a very slower pace than other contexts. Here, I liked to start my presentation with these two pictures. One is from Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the other one is from the movie, but actually it's also a book, the Asimov book, Bicentennial Man, 1976, and the first one, 1968. So we know that this debate about the use of artificial intelligence is not that new, and I like to show these pictures because they both show a different attitude toward the use of artificial intelligence. One, they see artificial intelligence as beneficial. Let's say the Asimov attitude, and the other one, they see HAL 9000, so artificial intelligence, as a risk for the human being. And during the studies, also reading and analyzing framework documents, and also reading, of course, the literature on the use of artificial intelligence in justice, I collected a lot of information on how much people, let's say, diverge from those that say, okay, artificial intelligence in justice can be beneficial, can help us to improve efficiency, efficacy, etc. And there are other people, like, I don't know, for instance, Professor Santos Rosso, whose recent book was entitled "Why AI Technologies Are Great Opportunities for Justice," that see artificial intelligence as I said, a great opportunity. My opinion is that most of these framework documents have been created in a, let's say, in a climate of uncertainty. So we don't really know in the future what will be the consequence of the use of the intensive use of these technologies in a very important context as the judiciary, or for instance health, and how much they will impact negatively or positively in this kind of sectors. Actually, how actors reacted to this very important kind of technology is through trying to discipline it through ethical, let's say, ethical guidelines, normative frameworks, etc. So our idea from the beginning, that started, I have to say, from the people that work with me in my working group in the ACT, was to analyze, to inventorying in the first place this kind of framework documents, and then analyze them through a technique which is called content analysis. So going on with the presentation. So basically, the idea was to inventorying the ethical frameworks. So we started with the ethical guidelines that have been listed in the website, Algorithm Watch, but then we try to select further documents through web research or through basically consulting the reference list. The idea was to balance three fundamental objectives. First, the inclusion in the study of the largest sample as possible, as far also as the researcher knowledge of language allow. The inclusion of influential documents that, of course, are related to the application of AI in justice, but this was not that easy. The maximum variation among the documents, also the selection of only normative documents, so declaration about how AI should be designed and deployed. So in the end, we had something like 108, no, exactly 108 AI ethics framework documents listed and then analyzed. Once we collected the documents, we started with the content analysis. This technique, we use a more qualitative approach, even though we used, of course, a software which is called Atlas. Basically, it consisted in the encoding of guideline sentences on the basis of their references on or ethical principle or, let's say, issues related to the application of artificial intelligence. The codes then, there were many, and then we had to group them in 102 macro groups that refers, let's say, to macro items or macro principles or issues related to the application of AI. The content analysis usually is a teamwork, and in this case, let's say the hand coding has been conducted basically by a research assistant, and then I worked as a, let's say, as a controller. I have to say that some may know that this kind of study has been done in by also other researchers, even in a different way. So let's say in the making of this study, we had also to confront with different approach to the same objective, and we try to be, let's say, to offer some more information, basically by obtaining a larger sample, and trying also to focus mainly on our context, this the justice context. So on the basis of the data acquired, first of all, for each framework documents, we try to characterize them on the basis of some factors that can then cross-reference with the items that we found inside the framework documents. Just a brief interruption. If something is unclear, or if you want to, of course, interrupt or suggest, please feel free. I'm okay with that, even though we will leave, of course, some space in the end for very important suggestions from you. So first of all, the sample, as I said, we had 108 documents. Here you can see that they are basically quite heterogeneous between no-profit, private, and public documents. That is, the actors that draft the documents are at the 30%, around 30% are no-profit and private or public. Basically, most of the drafters, let's say, are from government bodies or institutions, let's say public institutions. We found many framework documents coming from research groups, as well as from associations and businesses. Also, we try to understand if the group that drafted the document was composed by people with different kind of background. And this is very important, because when we talk about this kind of technology, the approach to development of artificial intelligence, it's usually multidisciplinary. And in fact, quite half of the documents that we found have been created by a group in which we have, let's say, a strong multidisciplinarity. And also, this is consistent with what we find inside the framework documents that address multidisciplinarity as an important principle when creating and developing artificial intelligence. Regarding the modality of drafting, we try to differentiate the framework documents as well. So most of documents have been drafted by involving an expert group. This is consistent with the type of technology we are talking about. Some of them, the 32%, prefer the private internal draft, involving only the let's say the components of the body that was drafting the framework documents, or also through the use of collegiate decision. But this is also this also depends from the kind of actor that was drafting the framework document. For instance, no-profit and public bodies preferred to involve expert groups in order to draft a framework document disciplining artificial intelligence, while private actors preferred, let's say, a private internal draft. Let's say the documents that we collected come from different countries, even though this is of course affected by the language that the two coders can understand. There was Italian, English, some German, some also German documents we included, French, and also Spanish. So not so many languages. So this is why let's say the area from which the sample come are mainly Europe and North America. We also try to characterize the documents on the basis of which is the geographical target, so which target at the geographical level is addressed. And most of the documents are, let's say, are addressed, let's say, on an international level, or on a national level, or a European level as well. We try to understand also which is the target toward which these kind of documents are addressed. And as we can see here in this graph, the main, most of the documents are addressed to or policymakers, the general public at 20%, as well as private companies, which is also around 20%, and the developers, around 15%. Few of them, like 2 out of 108 documents, are addressed to justice professionals. And this is also consistent to the field of AI application on which the document is based. In fact, most of documents talk about many kind of artificial intelligence technology. Most of them talk about generically about AI. Some of them differently concentrate on business application, and very few, like just one, this is the CEPEJ charter, focus on the justice, on artificial intelligence in the justice system. Most of the documents, first of all, are not compulsory. And secondly, they do not foresee a method of assessment. So they just indicate ethical guidelines or guidelines in general, but they don't foresee any kind of assessment in the afterward of the application of the document. Anyhow, for those documents that foresee a method of assessment, regular monitoring is the most diffused method, and it is found in the 42% of documents. Also, some documents are attached as the charter to a report or analysis about the application of artificial intelligence. Most of documents, around 60%, do not have a report or analysis attached, while the 42% have a report or analysis. Basically, the content analysis just focused on the part of the document which express guidelines, norms, or let's say regulation about the use of artificial intelligence. So we didn't go further into analyzing also the reports attached to this kind of documents. So the results of the analysis. Here, just a second. Here in the following slides, I will try to show the distribution of this kind of items related to principles or issues related to the application of AI, and how they are distributed in the documents. So the data here mainly refer on how many documents an item is retrieved, divided by the total of the documents. So we have a percentage, let's say. So these data are expressed in percentage. This word cloud is, let's say, a fancy way to show you how much this kind of item are, how this kind of item are distributed in the framework documents. So as you can see here at the center of this word cloud, we have data issues. So most of the documents are concentrated on the many issues related to the use of data, which we can imagine as the fuel of artificial intelligence, and on the risk related to the use of data. Most of the documents, of course, talk about transparency, risk of harm, explainability, but we will go more into it in the next slides. Here we have the distribution of items in the documents expressed in percentage. Of course, here I just present the first 25 items, and we can see that this data acknowledge how ethical documents converge on a set of principles and issues related to the artificial intelligence application. So the following items are diffused in more than 60% of our documents. So these are, as I said, data use issues, transparency, risk of harm, no discrimination, judicial values, privacy protection, explainability, and impact assessment. So as you can see, the first and most important item that we found is related to data, even though we have the issue related that regards transparency. So how much information are diffused regarding the use and application of AI. Risk of harm is also important, as we see it is diffused in the 67% of documents in regards of the possible harm that artificial intelligence may cause. No discrimination is very important also for what regards our context. In fact, we have many examples from the literature in which the application of AI was very risky in terms of discrimination of people on the basis of a racial group or gender, etc. Judicial values is also important, and this is also worth mentioning because we are not talking about only documents that focus on AI injustice. We are talking about all type of documents, all type of artificial intelligence in all contexts. And these judicial values mainly relate to values as due process, equal access to justice, fair conditions, fair trial, and fair trial. Privacy is also important. This is, of course, consistent with the literature. So I won't go on with all the data here, with all the distribution, but please feel free to come back to it later on during the discussion. So here we have the other scores related to the items ranking from 26 to 77. Even though they are, let's say, on a lower rank, I think that the analysis allowed to understand how many aspects are important when considering the application of artificial intelligence, aspects that usually we don't think about. For instance, the importance of involving stakeholders in the development of AI technology, something that we have seen the ICT literature on the application of technology in justice, or also how many, let's say, workforce challenges are related to the use of AI, and basically on the automation of work through the use of robots, of artificial intelligence. This is something that may affect also the justice context. Also, the black box issue that is related to transparency. So the fact that we, even though we deploy artificial intelligence, maybe we won't have access to all the information necessary in order to understand how it works, and this is sometimes risky. Or, for instance, the importance of not using artificial intelligence for surveillance purposes. This is also quite important. So I go on with the results. So I liked also here to distinguish results on the basis of geographical area, since most of framework documents analyzed come from Europe or North America. Here I just distinguish it between these two areas, even though here we may see some interesting patterns. First, the first important item in Europe is not data issue, but transparency. While in North America, still data issue is the main important issue when talking about artificial intelligence. In Europe, in European framework documents, no discrimination is quite important. It is at the 3rd place, while in North America at the 8th place. Privacy is very in a different level. Privacy is very important in North America, while in EU we find it at the 13th place. And it is also interesting the case of human rights, which is the 5th item found in European framework documents, and it is not between the first 15 documents for what regards the North America geographical area. In the other way around, also information. So the importance of information, or of delivering information, the use on how AI work is not present in the North American distribution. So I also liked to distinguish between a type of creator of that of framework documents. First. And here we have also some interesting patterns. Quotes related to data issues are mainly retrieved in public and private documents, but this is a generic, as we have seen, it is a generic convergence toward this item in all the 3 groups. However, no discrimination. It is very diffused in ethical documents drafted by not-for-profit organization. Transparency is important for all types of organization, and in fact, it is ranking in all cases in the first 7 position. And it is also interesting that the risk of harm is highly diffused in the not-for-profit and public documents, but it has not the same diffusion in the ethical guidance draft by private companies. In a different fashion, protection of privacy is very important for private organization, and this is not the case for not-for-profit and public organization. So, in the beginning, I show to you these 2 pictures. So let's say a beneficial way of thinking about artificial intelligence, and a harmful way of thinking about artificial intelligence. So here I wanted to analyze how much the framework documents talk about how beneficial may be artificial intelligence, and confront it with the item risk of harm and harm. These two items, harm, talk about the possible harm that artificial intelligence may cause, and risk of harm is a macro item talking about all the risks related to the application of AI and how to confront them. And as we can see, there is more, we find more worries, let's say, about artificial intelligence than, let's say, hopes. In fact, when we consider the total sample, the item beneficial artificial intelligence is retrieved in the 37%, while the risk of harm is found in the almost 70% of the total sample. If we divide the distribution per geographical area, as we did in the slide before, we find almost the same pattern. So also in Europe, as well as in North America, we consider artificial intelligence more on, let's say, more considering the risks related to its application than the possible benefit. As I said, the data issues that we found, the item data issues that we found in most of the documents is a macro that is composed of several items regarding the use of data, which is the fuel of artificial intelligence. And so here I show the distribution of this single item that compose the macro data issues, in order to understand which is the most important, which is the most diffuse in the framework documents. The analysis of ethical documents shed light on the importance, first of all, of ensuring the control of user on the use of data, and the control on the storing of data, and also the importance of diffusing understandable information on the use of data. It is also worth mentioning the attention posed by these documents on the legitimacy of data gathering, on the consent of user, and on the anonymization of data, and also on the security of data storing methods in order to protect them from the hacking or malicious use. So I'm sorry for all this data. I hope not to confuse anyone of you. Feel free to interrupt if it is not clear. We are almost to the end of it. And here I use Pearson correlation in order to investigate on the, let's say, internal coherence of the documents analyzed, with reference in particular to the normative receipts that they support and to the means that they indicate in order to reach the desired results. For instance, we find here a high significant correlation between security and impact assessment, meaning that documents currently indicate impact assessment as a measure fundamental in order to overcome potential harms coming from the use of AI. The data also indicate that secure systems need to foresee accountability measure. In fact, we have a strong correlation between security and accountability. Here, the correlation is also higher when we exclude from the sample the documents drafted by private organizations, while the correlation is not significant between security and accountability if we only consider documents drafted by private organizations. We have a non-significant correlation between human control and efficiency, and this may indicate that ethical documents emphasizing the importance of user control on AI, in the other way, do not take in consideration the efficiency of system. We have a coherent, let's say, correlation between protection of intellectual property, which is not correlated with transparency. Then it may seem not coherent to have a strong correlation between open data and privacy, But we may understand this result when we look at the correlation between open data and anonymization of personal data. That is, okay, privacy can be protected even though in a context that favor open data, but only if we consider the methods of anonymization and pseudonymization of personal data. So as I said, our context is not that broad. It is justice, and actually we have only one document talking about artificial intelligence in justice, and it is the CPESH Charter. This charter takes into consideration 5 macro principles, which is fundamental rights, non-discrimination, quality, transparency, and user control. Here I wanted to highlight that considering only justice, when we want to address the use of artificial intelligence, we should take into account also other contexts, because we may miss other items, other principles, which are, of course, important, as, for instance, the importance of impact assessment, which is retrieved in 62% of our sample, or accountability measures, which is retrieved in the almost 60% of our sample, or training, etc. You may find all the other items, let's say the high-scoring, high-ranking items that are not found in the CPESH Charter in table 3 here shown. And if you want, we come back to this result if it is interesting for you. So finally, some conclusive remarks. First of all, we have seen that day by day, we have seen that there is a production of this kind of framework documents. It is even difficult to keep the pace and try to still inventorying them and analyze them. So we arrived to 108 documents, but I am positive that there are many other around. Most of the documents, of course, converge, as we have seen, towards a set of principles, and we have seen it by looking at their distribution. And we have seen that there is also a sort of internal coherence in the documents analyzed. However, when we look at all the ethical documents analyzed and comparing them with the CPESH Charter, we acknowledge that by focusing on a single context of application, then sometimes we risk to limit the scope of the document. So we should look also at other contexts when we would like to try to discipline artificial intelligence in our context. And also, I came to the idea that this overproduction of norms is a sort of reaction to the uncertainty related to the use of AI. In justice, we have some examples, but it is not that diffuse, and we don't know the real consequences. Sorry. So it is desirable, of course, that in future we have more binding forms of this regulation and also in our area of application, even though this kind of regulation, but also the framework documents will need more experience and will need more experience on the application of this complex form of technology through trial and errors or accidents as well, in order to improve, let's say, the normative production. So I'm sorry, I finished with another slide because I'd like to propose some next steps and to talk with you about them, and to receive also some suggestions from you about how to improve this work. So my suggestion is to, first of all, try to improve this quantitative analysis, the one that I showed to you, because it can be enlarged to other areas, to other, let's say, operations also. And also, as I said, we may find other kind of framework documents, even though we are limited by the language that I and my research assistant can understand. Another idea is to come back to the documents and start a let's say, a deductive kind of content analysis. So we have a list of words that are important when talking about principle or ethical principle regarding the application of AI, like, I don't know, privacy, transparency, etc. And we use this list and we use this list in order to research these words into the framework documents and then apply this, let's say, more quantitative analysis and cross-check it with the inductive analysis that we already did. Also, as I said, I think, and I suggest it also for our group or also other groups, I think that we need to understand in how this technology works in real life. And in many technologies, complex technologies, as, I don't know, airplanes, most of the regulation come after accidents. So the experience comes through trial and errors, and I think we should look at the same processes. So I think it could be interesting, you know, to propose or to work in the future on a sort of inventory and analysis of AI accidents. This can be the basis in order to create our framework and suggest our framework regarding the application of AI in justice. Then, of course, we will go on with the draft of report and publication. With this regards only our group. And also, I may suggest that in the future we may work at our ACT framework document for justice, basing it on the experience that we are acquiring through this kind of studies that we carried on. Thank you for the attention, and sorry I took a lot of time, so I hope there is still some energy for the discussion. Thank you very much.